Hi, I'm Sue Stockdale, your host for the Sports 2000 podcast. In this series, I'm talking to some of the people involved in this British sports car prototype series that gives drivers the chance to compete at some of the UK and Europe's finest circuits. I'm excited today to be speaking to Derek Bell MBE, who is considered by many to be the greatest British racing driver ever to compete in endurance racing. Derek won the Le Mans 24 Hours 5 times, the Daytona 24 Hours 3 times, and the World Sports Car Championship twice. Derek is the president of the SRCC Sports 2000 Racing Car Club and had lots of wisdom to share with listeners. So we're splitting this interview into 2 parts. In this episode, I will talk to Derek about what got him interested in driving as a youngster, and he will share some of the highlights from the successes he achieved at Le Mans. Welcome to the podcast, Derek.
Well, it's lovely to be here. Thank you. Or there, whichever way you look at it.
I know as a 5 times Le Mans winner and many, many other accolades besides, you've had an illustrious career in motorsport. And I'd kind of like us to start way back at the beginning. I understand you were brought up on a farm as a young child, and that's perhaps where your interest in cars and driving began. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about what was it that piqued your imagination about driving in the first place?
Numerous things. It was almost inevitable that I'd have to do what I ultimately did. My dear old stepfather had us working on the farm all the time. No, I mean, not toiling, but working. I mean, I would still be pitching bales of hay when I was tall enough and big enough to lift one off the ground and pitch it up on the truck and that sort of thing. All I really wanted to do was sit on my backside and go ploughing a field, because that meant I didn't have to labour, but just sit there. So when I eventually got into driving tractors, my stepfather sort of believed that actually I was quite good at ploughing a straight furrow. And I used to take an art when I was cultivating to make sure that the lines were straight and when I turned at the end. The whole thing was a vague challenge, not exactly like driving around Le Mans, but certainly it made me think all the time. Maybe that helped really, because it kept my brain active. And when I'd look out the back of the cabin, I'd go, I might have been 6 inches out in my line, but I really wanted that furrow dead straight. And when I look back to see all the seagulls coming in the furrow in a straight line, isn't that weird? I mean, it's such a weird thing to talk about, but that's what you have to do when you're on a farm aged 12. And so I drove from the age of 9 principally and developed over the years into driving the bigger machinery and drove combine harvesters, obviously, eventually. And then the second side of it, of course, that Goodwood is up on the downs. From our fields down at Pagham, I could see up on the top of the downs, I could see the grandstands of the horse track. They possibly weren't there in the size they are now, but I knew where it was because there's a dwell in the hill there. And Goodwood Race Car Track was just below that. I couldn't see that, but I could hear the cars. And so I'd be out in the field with a hoe, hoeing sugar beet or whatever I was doing, which didn't involve noisy cars or tractors. And I used to sort of dream about one day driving up to Goodwood, but I could hear the guys going around testing, which in those days, of course, nowadays it's only 5 days of noise a year. In those days, it was 5 days a week of noise. And everybody came to drive at Goodwood, and the poor devils that lived close by had to put up with it. But that was what it was like then, back in the 50s and 60s. The seed was sown really at that point, because I could hear the gear shifting going around the track, and I could almost tell which corner the car was at. And then I joined local motor clubs. And I think actually prior to that, my father, my real father, used to take me to Goodwood. He worked with BBC television and BBC radio. And there was a gentleman called Robin Richards, who was a more live commentator on Formula One. Raymond Baxter, he was a very popular man. He did a wonderful film about Spitfires. I'd meet them, and then I got driven around the track by them maybe one day. Said, come on, jump in this Austin Healey, and they'd take me around. So that was when I was 12, 13. And then when it came of age, then I joined the local motor club. And then I went up there and was the marshal at Goodwood. In fact, was marshalling the day in 1962 when Sterling Moss had his big accident, which curtailed his career, basically. And he was my hero. So that sort of really was upsetting for me, apart from everybody else, that Sterling had his accident, which stopped him from an amazing career. Well, he still had a heck of a career, but he carried on for another 20 years. He would have been unbelievable. So that was really how I got it into my blood. And then ultimately, of course, I then chose to go to a racing drivers' school, which there was one in England, the Jim Russell School. By this time, I was 19 and I was at the Royal Agricultural University up at Cirencester. And so I used to commute from there on 2 or 3 occasions during the year. I didn't have enough money to go and spend much money there. So across to Norfolk, Snetterton, and I got into cars.
So already as I'm hearing you talk, Derek, I'm hearing the importance of utilising your senses of hearing, gear changes in the car, utilising your brain in terms of getting those straight furrows. So I want to take you into the seat of one of those Le Mans cars that you won in and just give us a sense of how you're utilising your senses when you're competing in that race.
You don't think about your senses, and even the preparation for a race. Somewhere I saw a question or a query about what do you think about before the race, which is probably as important as what you're asking me now. And of course, before the race, I didn't really have a routine. Naturally, you had a routine of not drinking and having any beers the night before, eating early, getting to bed early, getting plenty of sleep, and that sort of thing. So you were alert on the day. And of course, Le Mans being 24 hours, it was quite a build-up during that week of getting like a package of a bit of a storage of hours of sleep. I wasn't one of these people who could survive on 3 hours a night, although somehow I did during the race. And so as a person, you build up in anticipation for the big event. I did it 26 times. I was very lucky. And even those first times, it was initially you're very green. And when I think about my first race was with Enzo Ferrari's team, with a great Swedish driver called Ronnie Peterson. And Ronnie and I went into that race. We hadn't got a clue. There was nobody giving us any tips. Nobody told us what to do. And when we went for our driver's briefing, it was like, okay, you guys, there's four of our cars in the race. We want you just to keep out of everybody's way and have a good race. And I'm going, come on, tell me something. Tell me more what I should be expecting tomorrow. And they never did, which I thought was a bit narrow-minded. Maybe we were just to be used if necessary because we were the young, up-and-coming drivers, if you like, of that era. And so I went into my very first Le Mans, which is in fact only my second ever race in a sports car, which is the same sort of thing for Ronnie. It was a heck of an ordeal. But I think as far as the senses were concerned, they developed in those early races. The first year we didn't finish. The second time I went was in a Ferrari Daytona, and I did finish. And then about, I think, 8th or 9th. And then the third year, we were running incredibly fast, but I didn't finish that one either. So already I'm getting a bit of a build-up of experience. And I remember with John Y., who ran Porsche in 1971 in the Gulf Porsche, the long-tail car. And I remember John saying, it takes 3 years to win the race because the first year you go to gain experience, the second year you go to get a good result, and the third year you go to win. And the whole team builds up during that period over 3 years. So I was learning these attributes or whatever I had to learn without anybody telling me, but I was gaining that experience. And I guess we could talk about you and what the things you did. People couldn't really tell you. You're on your own, kid. You weren't on your own totally, but you had to make your own decisions in many ways. And so as far as I was concerned, I just learned gradually as I went along. But after 2 or 3 years, I got the routine and I knew what I was expected of me. I knew how fit I should be, and I got fitter and fitter. And then, of course, I got into magnificent cars later on. But in those early years, it was topsy-turvy. As far as the total mental outlook was the fact you just had to finish the race. If you didn't finish, you didn't learn very much. You asked me to say what you say to somebody that's starting their first race or their second race or their fifth race. You've got to finish the race. If you don't finish, you can't win. So that's what you've got to have in mind. Get yourself in a position that you can attack a bit more. And if you can't do it, you have to wait to the right time. And I was in cars that was never going to win. But there were times when I drove cars that I knew we could win. Unfortunately, we did the right thing on the right day and won.
I'm also hearing there's an element of patience required. Patience not only in terms of years, where perhaps you're learning your craft, so to speak, you're getting that experience, but also patience in a race to know when to make your move, when to take decisive action. Would you think that that's an important part of what a driver in any category has to be thinking about?
Yes. As I say to young guys again, when somebody says, tell them what you think, Derek, at the start, the race isn't won at the first corner. The race is won at the last corner, if there is going to be an ultimate point moment. And so the answer is you try and be there all the time. If you can lead, you lead. If you can lead easily, you lead. If you're struggling to lead, let somebody else pace it. It's the same as athletics. Let somebody pace you. Look at Roger Bannister when he did his under 4-minute mile. He had Chris Brasher and others pacing for him. And he only went through when he was ready to go at the end. And it's the same with us, really. It's not always that good to be out in front, but we don't turn it down when the opportunity arises. We take it with both hands. We think, well, we got here, so I guess we can stay here. And then, of course, you really want it to happen. I was only talking to somebody yesterday about our McLaren drive in 1995. and 96. And the interviewer said to me, how did you face it when you're leading the race with 6 hours to go? And I said, well, I knew we were capable of winning, but I was determined nobody was going to overtake me. And I didn't mind by taking them off, but I was going to give everything I had beyond me, drive it at 11 tenths and without damaging the car to keep ahead in that position, because I wasn't going to back down and actually let people see me being overtaken, in this case, by a much younger driver. And so those sort of things go through your head. It's a different scenario, and we all have a different story to tell for every race. And there is no set rule or format to go through.
Hi, it's me again. To let you know that support for this podcast comes from Broadtown Brewery, the microbrewery in Wiltshire with big ambitions. Their diverse assortment of beers range from classic best bitters and hoppy American West Coast IPAs, through to Baltic porters and Belgian triples. Only the best quality ingredients go into their beers, and their close attention to detail ensures that you can drink beers that are full of flavour and true to style. You can have them delivered straight to your doorstep, no matter where you live. So go on over to the website broadtownbrewery.co.uk and make your choice now. Now, one of the things I've been watching recently on the television is the documentary about Michael Jordan called The Last Dance. Yeah. And one of the things that I noticed there was about how they had to keep going. Once you've won, then there's an expectation on you, obviously, to win the next year. Yeah. And you've done that twice where you've won in subsequent years. Yeah. I'm wondering what it's like when you have that pressure of coming into something as being the previous winner. Is it any different then than it is going in when people don't expect you to win necessarily?
Well, I think the most difficult thing is when you go to win your third one in a row. That is really what you're saying, but the pressure is even greater then, although you're more relaxed in a certain way. No, I think when you've won it once, I think the fact is when you're in that position, you've won it once. There's a great possibility, unless it's a different formula, they've changed the formula, which over the years they did change the types of cars we raced, the different power, and the rules changed. The FIA changed the rules. And my real heyday, although I had a great time in the 70s with the long-tail Porsche and then the Porsche 935s and the Mirage and my first win in 75 with Jackie, the real period was 1981 onwards for 5 or 6 or 7 years with the Group C cars, with the Rothmans Porsche, and over here in America with the Lernerau car, which we won 20-odd races in the American Championship. But the car was just so prominent, not just ours. Ours was good, but that was down to the preparation. And then as drivers, we had a mentality, which I can't explain it. If you knew both Al Holbert and I, who raced here together, he basically owned the team. But we just had an amazing talent between us, or camaraderie, as I did with Jackie X. I couldn't tell you what it was. We never discussed it. We just did. I never got in the car after Jackie or after Al. And the car was never different to when I got in it before. Do you know what I mean? We had a way of bringing that car through a 24-hour race. And between us, myself and Jackie, and then Hans Stuck, and then Al Holbert, I won all those races. And I won 3 Daytonas with Al. And then 2 of those 3 years, I won Daytona and Le Mans and Daytona and Le Mans in consecutive years. And then with Stuckey as well in the British European car. So probably not answered your question properly, but the fact is each race you go into is a beginning of another race. It's another time, and who knows, you might have slightly different tires this year. Every year the car's an improvement, but it is for everybody. I mean, our cars were the best, but the other cars, there were still very clever people that operated the private teams, top entrants that were there for years, that did win as well. We didn't win every race we went into, we won the majority, but the preparation was the same for everybody, and the way you look at it and you prepare for it. But the thing is every race stands on its own. And now if you asked me which was my best win, I couldn't tell you, because a win means you had a perfect race. So everything worked out really well in the end. And you can't say what you did to win apart from drove with perfection. But the car was perfect. So we made the most of it. And that's why the best teams had the best drivers, and they didn't try and outdrive each other to try and prove I'm better than him. He said, well, if you try and push me, I know how fast I was pushing the car. And if you try to go faster, it ain't going to last. And I did say that to one team one year. And they said in the middle of the night, when I drove for Renault, actually, I was the only non-Frenchman in the whole team, including the engineers, mechanics, in 1978 or 9. And the year before, I'd led the race with Frenchmen right the way through till mid-morning. We went back that next year, and in the middle of the night, I got out of the car. We were like third or fourth place. And the team manager said, He said, you're going to have to go faster to your next session. I said, the gearbox won't take it. It'll break. And so this other Frenchman gets in who's younger than me, and of course the gearbox breaks. And because he drove it harder, and he was a Formula One driver, nothing against him, but in this case he had a reputation for that sort of thing. He wasn't my choice as a teammate, which generally I would have had a say in it.
So it's an important team effort, and the car is very critical in terms of the formula for success, Derek. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today, Derek, and to hear your reflections. My final question to you then is, what car do you drive normally now? And is it less exciting now that you get into a regular road car?
It is. Actually, driving in Florida is not less exciting. I mean, I think it's more dangerous than the first lap of a Formula One race, driving every day down I-95 if you have to go down it. People say to me, because of my involvement with Porsche, and I'm involved with Porsche and Bentley. I was the brand ambassador for the last 17 or 18 years with Bentley. And it was a wonderful, wonderful time. But people say, why don't you drive a Bentley? Why don't you drive a Porsche on the roads over here? And I said, there's nowhere to go. It's either north or south or east and west on the roads, all of the speed limits, and everybody's breaking them. And if there's an accident, all hell breaks loose because they're 5-lane, 4-lane highways. I don't enjoy it at all. I mean, I live on a marina here in Boca. And there's two chaps. One's got a brand new 911 Carrera GTS, and the other gentleman's got a Cayenne Turbo, like an SUV. You've got to drag me out my car. You've got to take me out in my car. I go, but with all honesty, where are we going to go? I mean, anybody can put his foot down. I mean, I'm not going to go up the world swirling around lampposts trying to show how clever I am at mid-70s. So it doesn't appeal. And that's why in England I enjoy it. I have, a nice car or two in England. So I get out and drive cross country to Silverstone or across Europe when we can to see my daughter and go to different events. I love it. I just love driving over there. And it's not because I want to drive at 100 miles an hour. It's just the freedom of driving through corners and having a good time.
Wonderful. Thanks again for your time today, Derek. I'm sure that our listeners to this podcast will be inspired and engaged by your words.
They'll probably switch it off, but thank you very much. It's a pleasure to meet you, Sue.
I hope you enjoyed hearing part 1 of the interview with Derek Bell. And if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please spread the word by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts and telling your friends about it too. You can find Sports 2000 on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, or hop on over to the website at sports2000.co.uk. In the next episode, you can hear part 2 of my conversation with Derek Bell. I hope you will join us then.